Okay, so within our study, we looked a lot at, like our title says, mindfulness and perceptions. And our first question that we want to ask to you guys is, what does mindfulness and perception mean to you? And this is open to anyone.
I think mindfulness means um, thinking of others, kind of just in general, like being, I guess you can't use the word in the same definition. So being aware of others and other things like interactions, and perception is how you perceive someone.
Anyone else?
I would say mindfulness is just like being aware of what's going on in your own body and in your own mind, and like being aware of your emotions and knowing like how you respond to things. And like that also I think like kind of goes along with your perception. Like just knowing how like your own mind necessarily like works and what it takes to like calm you down and to like figure out your own like mind.
Yeah, so in our study, we looked at basically everything both of you guys said was correct. Mindfulness and perception both are a lot of what it means to you and what you take from it. But in our study, we looked at a few different studies that use the definition of the psychological capacity to stay willingly present, and like you said, Hannah, just being aware of your own senses and your own body. So this was a big takeaway in our study, knowing one, that mindfulness and perception can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And this was kind of the foundation of where we started.
So within our study, we focused on mindfulness and perception, but specifically within the MindUP curriculum. The MindUP curriculum focuses on a lot of participation. It's really important that you are participating in these activities so that you're really taking in everything and making it count. We focused on optimism, embracing differences, and personal growth. Because if you're not optimistic about it, then as we know with a lot of things, you tend to not believe in it as much and it tends to not affect you. The curriculum, which was the MindUp curriculum, teacher training, because the teachers have to be trained in a certain way and use certain vocabulary in order to successfully implement the program, and then to extend it outside of the classroom. So to get the students to be able to focus on these things and apply it outside of the classroom itself. This curriculum is from the Goldie Hawn Foundation, and it focuses a lot on previous research and things like that. So it's actually it's an accredited curriculum, and it's really awesome that schools are able to apply it and get it used outside of the classroom as well.
So our study focused on three main research questions. So the first one was, what was the extent of the fidelity of implementation? All of these we'll go into later, looking at each question specifically broken down. Research question 2 was, what did the students feel like they learned? And then the research question 3 was, what did the teachers feel like they learned?
We had 97 elementary age school children ranging from kindergarten to fourth grade. We had 5 teachers, so we had a kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade teacher. Our students' ages were from 5 to 10 years old. We didn't collect any of that, but since they're from kindergarten to fourth, those are the age ranges for that. And they were acquaintances of one researcher. So that was awesome to be able to like have that so we could really get into the school and see how this was working.
Yeah, so the procedure with the MindUp curriculum was broken down into 15 days of curriculum, so ideally 3 weeks with 15 lessons, one for each day. There were 4 different units, and each unit focused on something different within mindfulness and perception, like getting focused, the relationship between the body's senses and thoughts, all about the attitude. So staying willingly present in your mind and knowing your attitudes. taking action mindfully. And then the steps with this was talking about the brain, learning goals, being engaged, and just having lesson plans. So going back to that first question I asked you with what was mindfulness and what was perception, you can see here that within the 4 units that they're really broken down into a broad range of what mindfulness and perception can be. So the Mind Up covered anything from getting focused to your attitude and just staying mindful.
Our materials, we had 2 questionnaires. We had a teacher baseline questionnaire and an end questionnaire. It was the same questionnaire for both times. A sample question off of that would be, my students demonstrate acts of kindness. The teachers would go through and they would answer on a 1 to 5, and then our Chromebox alpha for that is 0.789. Our student questionnaire was, they only got it 1 time, but a sample question off of that would be, I am mindful of my senses. Our questions that we gave them were based off of the vocabulary specifically from the MindUp curriculum, so they should be familiar with that. And our Chromebox alpha for that is 0.688. But we also had a fidelity of implementation checklist, as that was our research question 1. So it was important that we were able to go in and see how well it was being implemented into the classroom. And we did that. We wanted to do that for each teacher, but it didn't necessarily work out that way, which we will talk about later.
So our student survey, this is an example of it. So it went from 1 to 4, and so 1 being not true, 4 being true all the time, and we used this bar graph, so it gave the kids a visual of being able to circle which one they felt applied to them most. So the questions with this student survey was, I understand what the brain is, I am mindful of my senses, I understand what perspective is, I am more optimistic and think positively, I can help myself be happy, I demonstrate acts of kindness, and I can focus my attention and calm down. So you see that asterisk beside I understand what perspective is, and that was the most difficult question for these kids to answer. It was kind of all over the place. There was no real connection between the survey and the question. Therefore, it was thrown out just because it didn't work out so well.
So for our analysis for research question 1, which was the extent of fidelity of implementation, the researchers went through and we have our own checklist for that, which we have an example of. Research question 2, which was, what did the students feel like they learned? We ran a 1-way ANOVA on their data that we collected. And for research question 3, which was, what did the teachers feel like they learned? We did a paired samples t-test on the teacher data.
So here's an example of our research question 1, our fidelity of implementation. So our original plan was to go in each Friday and Monday and observe a teacher and then observe together. So we were able to observe together once, and whenever we did observe together one teacher, there was 100% agreement. So here's the example of that teacher that we observed. We asked them questions from or we didn't ask them a question, we were observing. So it was to ask them to point to parts of their head, and you can see on question 3 that we both agreed yes, the teacher did that. I won't go through all these, but that's just an example of how we decided to agree and where our iterator reliability came from.
For research question 2, which was, what did the students feel they learned? We have our kid perception histogram over to the side. And as you can see, our mean was a 3.38. So on average, that's what the students ended up picking. Our standard deviation was 0.510. And our Chromebox alpha without question 3, which was the perception question, was a 0.688. Now, as you can see with the histogram, we have for the kids in kindergarten, which is the first one, you can see that they tended to score higher, or they answer the questions higher, so mainly between like a 3 and a 4. which we expected because when you're younger, you have this idea that you know everything and everything comes perfect to you. Whereas once you get to fourth grade, they tend to answer them on lower, which is also expected because by then they're able to more understand, like, yeah, I might not know that. I don't feel as comfortable with that. So it was really interesting to see that the data and what that showed. We didn't necessarily.
2 minutes.
Sorry, what was that?
2 minutes.
Okay, thanks. For research question 3, that is our teacher data. So what do the teachers feel like they learned? This is our paired samples t-test. So we have our baseline and our inline. We had a p-value of 0.02, and so as you can see with that, there's no significant data within this. This also is without question 1 on our teacher questionnaire, which was, my students understand what the brain is. We had to throw that out as well because it just didn't line up with our data, and we had stronger results without it.
For a discussion, some things that we just pointed out was with the pre-test versus the post-test, there was some student absences, and that's kind of difficult within a school to make sure that there aren't absences. That's just kind of part of what doing a study in a school is going to look like. Our main thing was, after talking to teachers and after discussing with between Lauren and I, the beginning of the school year might look better with less conflicts in a schedule, and just those first 3 weeks, teachers not being behind and implementing this so that it looks more clear throughout the school year. The good thing about this is it generated a lot of in-class student excitement, and it opened doors for teachers. A lot of them want to continue to do mindfulness lessons and just continue to go forward with teaching their students this. Some acknowledgements we had were the students who participated. We thank the teachers for their time, effort, and cooperation, and the school counselor, who was awesome, for beginning the idea, the help, and push for the implementation.
Any questions?
Do you think you guys' data could have been possibly different if you guys would have done like a higher grade level? Because as you get older, like just knowing and being more aware of things, do you think it would have changed you guys' outcomes?
100%, yes. I think, I don't know about Lauren, but I think that especially like for question 3, we had to throw out because the kids didn't understand. I think if you would have looked at a middle school age or high school age, a lot of these questions would have been, they would have understood more, and even the lessons would have looked different. So I think you would have received different data, but it was interesting looking at it at this elementary school level.
And I agree too, because like as you could see, kindergartners tended to rank themselves higher on the 4-point questionnaire, whereas the 4th graders started to give more honest answers, I guess, where they were ranking themselves lower because they don't believe that they know everything and that, things like that. So I do think that that would have been a lot different.
Do you go back to your results for a minute?
Which one?
The teachers.
Yeah.
You said that was not significant?
It's not really as significant as we would have hoped.
Well, yeah, but it's P less than 0.05.
Yeah, but
You do have a statistically significant increase in what teachers thought the students were getting out of it. And I don't think you should throw that out because it's not the magical numbers you want. I mean, this type of research is very hard. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to get clear. So you get something, you want to jump up and down and celebrate it.
Yeah, sometimes a distinction is made between statistical significance, which you've got, and at least in my area, it's sometimes referred to as clinical significance. That is, whether the difference is large enough that you think that it really is making a difference in people's lives. And that seems to be where you're hedging your bets. But yeah, as John said, it's so hard to get any difference between groups in applied kinds of settings.